Hello, I'm Sandy Allnock, and we're going to work on part 2 of this drawing. I did the bird in a video about, a month ago, I guess it was, on Easter weekend. You may remember seeing that one. A lot about hatching and cross-hatching and how the two of them work together to create a variety of values. Well, I've been working on it. I've been doing more stuff to it. And you're going to see some stuff in here that was great and fine and worked out great. We're going to talk about patch hatching, but you're going to also see a bunch of stuff that went really badly and ended up getting removed entirely from the piece. And it was rather tragic. So yeah, let's get started. I'll tell you how this went. So let's begin with the part that went well, which was the patch hatching. And it's the thing in the title of the video. Patch hatching is when you take groups of lines, and they'll go different directions, but groups of lines that turn into a bit of a patchwork quilt. You can either do what I'm doing here, which is fill in one area by just turning the lines going different directions. And I generally do horizontal, vertical, and then angle to the left and angle to the right, just to try to keep it relatively-ish consistent. And then sometimes I'll fill in a whole area. Other times I get bored and I want something different. So I'll start moving the groupings of lines apart from each other, but all in the same direction. And then I'll turn either my hand or the paper and start with a different angle of line. And that is real-time drawing. I do this very slowly, but I will speed this up or we will be here all day. This is a 16 by 20 piece, and I worked on this for many, many hours. I think I had about 6 hours of footage, and I didn't even film all of it. I just filmed chunks of it. So it was quite a bit of sitting here making these lines. I sat in the living room watching TV doing it sometimes, other times here in the studio. But as I start moving down toward an area that I want to get lighter, this is a type of line that helps you to get some value difference. Fill in the darker portion or that mid-tone portion, and to get lighter, use fewer lines or separate them more. Leave more airspace in between them. So I'm going to do the same thing as I had done before, just doing all the lines in one direction and then doing them a different direction. So I did 4 lines closer together for a darker value, 3 lines further apart for a lighter value. And I'm going to do every other one in this ink color. This is a full strength carbon black platinum ink. And for the ones in between, I'm going to switch over to a second bottle of ink that I have. One of my old bottles that I was going to initially throw out, and then I realized I shouldn't. I just put water in it when it was all out of ink. And then I have a gray ink that I can draw with. I can use the same technique, but create a whole different type of value because I'm using a gray ink instead. And I wouldn't necessarily put an ink like that in a pen. I suppose you could, it wouldn't hurt it, but I don't know if it would drip out of it. So if you're going to put ink into a fountain pen, I tend to think of like an actual ink going in a fountain pen rather than something that's really watered down. So I'm using a dip pen for this whole project. So you can see that I have drawn a couple lines on the outside where there's going to be a border. And that is the portion that's going to be going off the rails. But we're going to stick with watching a bunch of this at high speed, making patch hatching, while I talk about what happened there, because I had a bit of a crash and burn. And often when I'm struggling with a piece, I get out my phone in between and I start texting pictures to some of my art friends. I'm like, what do you think? Should I try this? Have I overdone that? Does this need more? Does it, just asking questions. And they do the same with me. And one of my friends who also lost her mom in the last year just started talking about that. She said she was just losing her focus. and she couldn't figure out quite what was going on because she's not really had that as an issue before. And she was feeling sad, and I wasn't feeling super sad as we led up to Mother's Day. So I didn't really think that was an issue for me. So I just kind of kept working and attributed most of my mental glitching to the fact that I'm really overwhelmed right now. I've taken on a really big project that my patrons got to hear about recently, and it's just keeping me awake at night, and I'm not getting good sleep and all that sort of thing. So I was, thinking that maybe I just need extra help. So just kept leaning on some friends to give me advice. But as I kept working through this, I did start thinking that maybe there was something to the fact that Mother's Day was coming, and I just was working hard to avoid thinking about it. And I, sort of summoned my mom in my mind and my heart, asked her what she thought of it. And I didn't expect a physical answer to show up. I just kept working and kept making lines and lines and lines and lines and lines. And Mom didn't answer, so I didn't think anything of it. But I kept noticing something. And I felt like maybe my eyes were just going buggy on me because it seemed like things were moving. Like my lines were walking across the page. And that's easy to think when you're doing this many lines because, things do get a little weird. You get a little rummy in the studio. But once the line started moving off of the area that I was drawing on, I realized there really is a little something going on here. And it's a little wormy. I had bought myself some flowers for Mother's Day. I sent some to my mom via my cousin. She delivered them to the cemetery. But I bought myself some, and apparently this little guy came along with my flowers. And he was just marching around on all my lines, and I didn't see him until he showed up on the white area of the illustration board. And I just kind of sat and watched him for a while. And watched him work really hard. He wasn't slacking by any means. But he also was just taking his time. He was on a mission. He was going somewhere. But, he's just a little guy. He's working at it bit by bit. And I took that as a sign from Mom to stop stressing so much and texting my friends and just take my time and continue working. And this little guy was let outside because I don't like the idea of having little buggies in my house. So took him outside and set him loose on a bush. He probably was a little terrified moving from one place to another when I brought the flowers in the house. And then he ends up here walking across something very unfamiliar to him. But I was curious. I filmed him because I wanted to see if he would act differently than the lines. Like, did he want to be on the lines? Did he care that the lines were there? And he pretty much did not care. If anybody knows what kind of little caterpillar or little wormy or whatever he is, let me know, because I would like to know. So I took the little worm as my mom's sign to just take your time, stay on your mission, slow down, take it easy. And I told myself that if I didn't get my video out for Tuesday, nobody's going to hate me for it. So I'm just going to take my time and do what needs to get done to finish it. So here I'm working with the lighter ink, that washed out ink that I had added some water to. And I do have to dip the pen in it more often when I use this as opposed to a regular ink. And I think it must be because a regular ink has more viscosity to it, so it sticks to the pen nib better. So I do a lot more dipping during this portion of it. But you can see how I can get a lighter value quite easily using the same marks as I had used for the darker value. But as I worked through this and, was trying to figure out what it is I need to process, because it's been a long time since Mom passed. I mean, this is the first Mother's Day without her, but I've gotten lots of grieving in. I've done a lot of that work, but I guess that work just isn't over. As a lot of people say, when your mom or your dad passes, it sticks with you. So I guess that will be something that comes. But as I started getting to the end of working on all of this portion, these sunbursts, I realized now I have to figure out what I was going to do with the border. Because I had drawn the border lines in there, and I know I had a plan at one point, but I wanted to keep going after I got done with this. So I started turning my mind toward what do I want that to look like. And I got in my head some kind of fleur-de-lis sort of thing. And so that was going to be the style that I wanted to draw that border in. I could have tried out a chunk of it first. I could have done that. I did not do that, but I could have done it. But I was anxious to get it done. Even though I had just learned my little lesson from my little worm, I decided to dive in. And I divided the border into inch-wide sections, which is what the starbursts are marked at 1 inch each. And then I made these kind of S curves on the verticals. I designed a different pattern for the horizontals and just started blocking in these S curves all the way down, and then went in and started adding detail, just different kind of fleur-de-lis type of detail. I debated whether or not I could get away with every one of the S's being completely different, because I probably would have been better off if I were going to do this. And, turns out the point I'm going to make is not a point that is going to matter in the long run anyway, because that's not the part that I had trouble with. I could have drawn one of them and then used some transfer paper to keep redrawing the same shape so that I could replicate it. But, I just thought, I'm not going to stress out about it. I'm a loose inker, and I'm going to let that part go. So I did draw out the first one and some scallops on them, and trying to figure out how some edges were going to go and how I was going to make some curves and divide those into sections to make them kind of feel fleur-de-lis-ish. But my not perfect inking made me realize I was going to have to put some inking behind these shapes. And so I kind of went into the mode of treating this border as something completely different than the rest of the drawing. Because even though, it's on the same paper, the bird is right there, I wasn't really looking for what was going to complement the bird. I just had it in my head that I had to do this border because I had drawn the border in there. And I didn't consider what types of lines were going to work well for it. So that is my bad. But I proceeded anyway because, that's how I roll. And I had gone around and, drawn the entire curve there. And for this one, by the way, I did switch over. This might have been part of the problem. I did switch over to a fountain pen because I wanted something that I was going to get a really good, consistent line and wasn't going to get breaks in it where I had to go dip for it. So I was using the fountain pen for that reason, so I could just keep working. And so then I designed this one for the horizontal, and independently, both of them are quite fine. They're not well inked, but, the designs were fine. But they didn't really match with the bird art. Like, nothing matched. I switched pens for one, so I had a thicker line. And if I'd had a thicker line for a good reason, then maybe. And this was more for a technical ease of drawing reason as opposed for a design reason in the art. But I thought, I'm going to keep going because what was I going to do after I put the first one down? I was kind of committed because it's illustration board. I can't just glue something else on top. So I kept going. And I spent many hours on these borders and putting these lines in and trying to make them have some flow to them. And I did get finished. And as a black and white, I think the border wasn't awful. It was a little distracting and didn't quite fit with the bird, but it wasn't awful at that point. But I also had closer together lines on the two sides, on the left and right, so the value was darker. And on the top and bottom, it was lighter because I had kept the pen, I guess because the design was simpler, I had kept the pen lines a little further apart from each other. But I decided to just do a Scarlet O'Hara, and I'll think about that later. And I just wanted to get to some color. So I got my watercolors out and I started putting color in here. I haven't painted on illustration board in a long time. And it does paint decently. It doesn't do like big splashy washes, but it paints okay. And I was just a little nervous about putting too much color down. So I didn't want to overdo it because this is a white bird. And while I wasn't worried about keeping it, pure white, I'll post a photo of the reference in here so you'll be able to see it. I did want to have some color in it, and I wanted some loose color so that the bird would really feel like he's flying. And as I was working on this, I thought, maybe I need to see what the color is going to be on the border so that I know how dense the color is going to need to be on the bird. Because I was already somewhat nervous about that border having multiple colors in it, multiple values, so that, the top and the bottom were darker than the left and right. And my brain was kind of working on what colors should I use in that so that I can hide the fact that those were different and try to still make the border feel like it worked. And so I started painting the border and trying to figure out how intense to get with it. And I would dab it off because then that was like, oh no, that's too much, because then the bird is going to have to be really dark to make that work. And then I dabbed it off and then it was like, oh, that's not enough. I need more color to hide what's in there. And so I went back and forth and yes, I just got lost on this border. I really did. And the more I worked on it, the more I was getting myself committed to finishing it so that I could just say I finished it, because I had already started it and already got this far and spent this much time on it, that maybe I just need to stick to it. And maybe, sometimes different pieces that I work on at the end, like all of a sudden everything comes together. I thought maybe at the end that's going to happen. So I got that first wash down and then decided maybe I needed to see what that starburst background was going to look like. And I didn't trust myself to do a smooth enough wash on illustration board to make this part work. So I got out colored pencils instead. And once I put the pencil down, which goes down nicely on illustration board, I used a cotton ball to smoosh it around so I could fill in any gaps and get rid of any lines. That worked nicely. And the color that I put around the bird ended up making the bird feel more white as the blue pencil got darker. So that was good. But then I had to get back to that stinking border. And I decided on trying to paint them to make them look like they're gold. So I had, highlights and shadows and all that kind of thing, and trying to, knock the color down and, make it darker so that it sort of covers all that line work that I didn't like so much. And decided that I had to put some color over top of all that line work and opted for a Prussian blue, thinking maybe that would add some elegance to it, because then all that gold would feel like it's up on top and would feel all special, and wouldn't that be great? And it was not great. It just was not great. And I was working at it too fast as well, so I was making a mess of the painting. I completely forgot my little inchworm and his little lesson. I guess he's more of an 1/8 inchworm. He was very tiny. So I cut it all off. I cut off the whole border. I cut off hours and hours and hours of labor and just left myself with the bird in the background. And I can't tell you what a good decision that was. How much of a good decision it was, because goodness gracious, I felt like I had just gotten a haircut. When you have really long hair and you cut it really short for summer and you just feel like a new person? That's what it felt like. Because I cut off the part that was not working. Now, that's not always possible in our art. Sometimes the part that's not working is in the middle. But there's often a piece of it that is working. Or there's an area that's blank that you can practice so that when you redo it, you can, get some practice ahead of time on that paper. So whenever I do have a disaster, And this disaster was fortunately the border, which could go away. Part of the disaster was just losing all the time on it. But a lot of times I'll save a small section of a large piece. I will, fill in a blank area and just practice on whatever kind of flowers are going to be in the scene, because I know if I repaint it, I'm going to need to have practice at those flowers anyway. So I rarely toss any paper without like the whole thing being covered with sketches and doodles and practice brush strokes and all sorts of things, because using that paper, squeezing the most knowledge out of it as possible is really important to me, because I can't afford to just be throwing away paper because I didn't like how something came out. And then there are some times when I can rescue something at the last minute too. And that has happened enough times that I've learned to just keep going. And then, if disaster strikes at the end, then so what? I've learned as much as I could from that piece of paper. And in this case, at least the portion that I totally wrecked was the portion on the outside edges, so I could get rid of it. But once I started just loosely watercoloring this bird and just throwing in those, kind of yellow-brown tips that the bird had on the wings, and the kind of golden warm colors on the body, cooler colors for the rest of the wings, and then playing around with mixing some of those colors in between and throwing in some blue so I could bring the color from the background in, and just having fun with it. That was when I felt like my mom's inspiration was back. Like I was doing this part on Mother's Day. I'm recording this voiceover on Mother's Day, and I can say I spent the day with Mom. I definitely did. When I feel like I'm doing what she's asked, and she wanted me to do more animals. She wanted me to do more painting. She wanted me to focus more on my watercolors, my wildlife. I just felt like I was doing as she advised, and she sent a little worm to remind me to just take it easy and just keep doing me. Just keep making the art. Keep putting one little worm foot in front of the other, and don't quit. Don't give up. And that little worm might have made it into my house on some flowers that I brought into the studio, but he's now back outside, carried out to a bush where he can go live his best little life, out of doors. Hopefully he's getting himself a good snack. And I think that'll happen to us as well as artists, and in all different kinds of walks of life. When we do get off track, there's often somebody who's going to be able to help us get back to it, get back to the place where we were meant to be, instead of the side trail we might have landed on. And sometimes that side trail is going to be our best place for learning, and sometimes it's just a place where we just need to let something go. And I know that I needed to let go of that border, and the next time I try a border, maybe I'll have to do something with a deliberate border that's planned out. Because that was one big thing I learned, was that I needed to plan out the border so it goes with the rest of the drawing. So I did not do that at all this time. But while I finished adding crazy colors to this, because I loved the warm colors on the tips of the bird's wings in the photo, as well as the warm colors on the belly. So I'm just kind of playing with all of those, letting some of the blues from the background come in, and just kind of having fun here. I want to tell you what's going to come up soon on Saturday, May 17th. My regular Saturday video is going to be a drawing video, so you should bring pencil and paper with you to do a sketch with me, and I'm going to show you how to block in your subject. And we're just going to talk about that here on YouTube. And then afterward, like the video starts at 8, it'll probably be a 15-20 minute video at the most, and then at 8:30 we're going to meet on Zoom, and we're going to work more on that drawing at my regular open studio, because every month I do one, and it's free. You can come and join me anytime, and we're going to be working more on that drawing, as well as I have a real quick demo to do for some students who had questions about watercolor. So I'll do a real quick watercolor demo, and then we'll get to the drawing and put more into it and continue the lesson that we start here on YouTube. So it's kind of like a free class on Saturday morning. So 8 a.m. Pacific, whatever time that is your time, and be here on YouTube, and I'll have the Zoom link for you if you want to come join us for the further drawing, because that should be fun. And so here my bird is pretty close to done. I just kind of kept fussing with colors, adding in pops of things that are a little brighter, a little bit of the bright blue to pull some in, and then, oh, too much. Back and forth as I always do. I am a fusser when it comes to watercolor, but this one was a lot of fun. I learned a ton from it. I don't know if you learned anything from it, but I hopefully have taught you to plan your work a little bit better than I did for this one. So keep using your paper until it teaches you everything it has for you. And I will see you at Open Studio. So remember, be here at 8 a.m. on YouTube for the blocking in, and then we'll go to Zoom at 8:30. So I will see you on Saturday. And in the meantime, get out there and make some art, make some messes. Feel free to make some mistakes, because, it's just paper. I will see you soon. Take care. Create something every day. I'll see you Saturday.